So to introduce our presenter today, Dr. Angela Stopper is the Chief Learning Officer and Director of Learning and Development at the University of California, Berkeley campus. She is responsible for the team who creates and delivers campus-wide learning initiatives, supporting supervisory, management, functional, technical, and non-technical learning efforts for the campus's 9,000 staff and faculty administrators. In addition to her work at UC Berkeley, Angela is a faculty member with Penn State World Campus, where she has developed and is teaching a course for the online Master of Professional Studies degree in Organization Development and Change. Angela has a long history of research projects and presentations focused on many aspects of organization development and is happy to be with us today talking about a new way to think about the 70-20-10 model for learning and development. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Angela. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Wesley. I'm so excited to be here and chatting with you all. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you just fine.
Fabulous. Well, let's get started. So thanks so much for all of you for joining me today. As Wesley said, I'm really excited to be here with you and to spend the next, half hour, 40 minutes kind of talking about a new way to think about the 70-20-10 learning model. So, the point of what we're doing today is I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about a research project that a group of us did where we talked to people around the globe around how they are using and measuring the success of formal, informal, and social learning. Kind of discuss what we're doing here at the University of California, Berkeley campus, and to discuss with you a little bit about how you might think about updating your 70-20-10 learning model to engage the learners within your organization. And to do that, I will spend just a moment talking to you about 70-20-10 in theory, what 70-20-10 looks like in practice, how you may consider rethinking 70-20-10, how we went about revisioning our entire learning and development shop here at Berkeley, and how our new thinking around 70-20-10 fit into that. And then also, if we have a little bit of time, I'll talk to you about what we learned, what our research team learned when we were talking to chief learning officers and other learning and development professionals across the globe around how they were using and measuring their learning success. So go ahead and jump right in. I just wanted to spend just a few seconds talking with you about 70-20-10 model to make sure we're all level set and at the same level of knowledge. This model's been around for a really, really long time. What it says is that as learning and development professionals and thinking about learning and development in the workplace, we should think that our workers, so the folks that are working within our organizations, learn about 70% of what they need to be successful in their jobs through experience, so through work experience. About 20% they learn from others, so kind of the social learning aspects of learning how to do your job and how to be successful. And about 10% of what they learn in formal classrooms, so learning through structured courses and programs, are what encourage people to be successful when learning on the job. And so, this model, as I said, has been around for a while, and people have been talking about 70-20-10 as a learning theory for a very long time. And so what my research team started by doing was going out and talking to 31 chief learning officers and other folks that run learning and development shops around the world about what they're actually seeing and what they're putting into practice within their organizations. So on your screen right now, you see a list of the folks that we talked to as the first part of this research project. We had a wide group of people we talked to. A lot of them were in the native language, so we had a lot of interviews that were done within native languages in China and Singapore and Russia, and then translated into English so my US-based research team could go through and comb through and find the learning from the interviews. And what we learned around formal learning, to start with, was, not terribly different from what we expected. A lot of people, when asked what they were doing in the formal learning space, talked about learning and development programs. What was a little more unexpected, or maybe was expected, but we were happy to see the result, was folks used a lot of other words when they were talking about the formal learning that they did within their organizations as well. So they said things like feedback and coaching and communities of practice, knowledge sharing. And, according to the 70-20-10 model, those things really fall into the informal and social aspects of learning, not within the formal learning programming, which is actually what we were asking these folks to share with us. So in our next set of interview questions, we asked them about the informal learning experiences that they were making available to the people within their organizations. And again, we heard a lot of things that we expected to hear. A lot of people talked about online learning that's available for folks whenever they need it, on-the-job learning, kind of that just-in-time learning that we make available to the folks within our organization. Some people talked about experiential learning opportunities. But then, again, just like in the formal space, they started saying things that we hadn't anticipated to see falling within that pillar of informal learning. They started talking about networking and, again, coaching, collaborative learning, peer-to-peer learning, using situational learning in communities of practice. And, again, within the 70-20-10 model, those things really fall within the formal and the social pillars of the 70-20-10 model. So again, starting to see kind of a disconnect between what the model is telling us and what we're seeing actually put into practice. So as you might expect, the third place we looked and asked folks about was what they were doing in their social learning strategy. And just like in formal and informal learning, we saw a lot of things that we anticipated we were going to see. We saw a lot of folks talking about communities of practice and group-based learning, project-based learning, networking, those kind of things. But we also had a lot of folks that started talking about social media. So using Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all these other kind of social media tools, and saying that their social learning strategy was simply using these social media tools. And, there's even groups that have put forward models that talk about formal learning, informal learning, and social learning, and how social media needs to be integrated and woven in and built into all of the things that we do in learning and development in order to make us successful. What I'd like to put forward to you right now is the fact that while this can be true, there's also a difference between social learning and social media. Social media, by design, is designed to be addictive. So it's designed to get people coming back and using it all the time and spending a lot of time and diving deep and really, spending lots and lots of time within their social media accounts. Whereas I would put forward that for social learning, our goal is to be able to get people to come together and share learning that they need to share with each other, and then be able to get back to work and put those learnings to use on the job. And, as you're looking at the difference between social learning, so learning from our networks, and social media, I think you can probably guess what my thought is around the difference between those two. As you can see from our friend on the screen here, social learning, as I said, is really about getting you the information that you need to move on and to do your job and be successful, whereas social media can really become addictive. And as you're moving through your social media spaces, work can pile up around you and make you actually less successful. And so with thinking about what we learned from these interviews with our 31 thought leaders, the next step that our research team took was to build a survey with the learning from what we gathered from our thought leaders and send it out to a group of folks that work with ATD, so the Association for Talent Development. Partnering with them, we sent out the survey. We ended up getting back nearly 600 responses from 42 different countries. And in that survey, we asked a lot of questions, but we really asked folks to think about 70-20-10 and talk to us about what they were actually implementing within their organizations. And, we got a lot of data back. There's a research report written on this. But basically what we saw when we asked folks where they were spending their time, most folks were spending their time within learning and development shops on providing formal training. And so just to get your kind of feel on this right now, I'd love to open up a poll. And let's see, I'm going to launch the poll here and ask you to let us know, where do you focus the majority of your time? So you saw in our results from the survey we did with the constituency of ATD that most of the folks focused around formal learning. So if you can just spend a little time voting here on where you're spending your time, creating formal learning experiences, creating informal learning experiences. So it looks like we have just about everybody having put a vote in. Thank you so much for that. So what we found when we talked to folks about this within the ATD group was really about 22% spent their time in the informal learning space. 33% said they were spending time, or their time was being spent within the social learning space, and 45% of our time was being spent in the formal learning space. So I'm going to share the results here of our poll. And you can see from our poll, just done really little informal poll we did here, we see about the same thing, actually a little bit more. Most of us spending our time, 75% in the formal learning space, about 15% of our time is being spent in the informal space, and then about 10% in the social space. So, that's not terribly surprising, I don't think, considering what we do as learning and development professionals. But I wanted to share with you just a couple of thoughts from some of the folks that we talked about as part of our interviews and survey. This is a quote from somebody who's a chief learning officer at SAP. And what they said was that 70-20-10 is fine, but it's kind of outdated, and it's really more of a concept to help people get their heads around what we're doing in learning and development. And it really depends. It depends on what industry you're in, what your learners need. And 70-20-10 really focuses on us. So focuses on us as L&D professionals and what we're pushing out to our learners. Here's another quote from one of the folks we talked to from India. And they talked about, again, this notion that within the organization, depending on where they're working, depending on the sector, depending on what you're doing, the 70 and the 20 and the 10 might not actually show up as 70 and 20 and 10. And so kind of rethinking 70-20-10, instead of focusing on us, the L&D professionals, pushing out information, maybe we should focus it on the learner. So focus it on what the learners need versus what we're pushing out. So with that kind of in mind, I want to spend just a little bit of time talking to you about how I used that to revision what we were doing here in learning and development at UC Berkeley, and then talk to you a little bit more about a new model that might be helpful for you to help get your head around how you might do some revisioning of your own. So the first tool that I used when taking on this team was the ATD Talent Development Framework online tool. So this is the tool that was created from that research project I was talking to you about earlier, where we went out and talked to all those folks about what they were doing within their learning and development shops. This is a free tool. You don't have to be an ATD member to use it, or to use it to kind of help map your organization. You can just jump onto that URL right there and start using the tool. I think you have to create an account, but there's no fee or anything associated with that. And so what I did when I came here at Berkeley was, it was about a year and a month ago, about 13 months ago, I took a look at what our learning and development shop was doing using this online tool. And we had about 6 trainers on the team who were really kind of acting in stovepipes, so acting as individual contributors, working just on the programs they were working on. We had 3 administrative staff and support staff that were part of the L&D team, and then 3 student staff. And what we really focused on was compliance training, was probably our biggest focus. We had a little bit of focus on tuition assistance, in that we helped folks be able to take some courses here at Berkeley at a reduced fee. We did a little bit of leadership development. Then in kind of a secondary component, we did a little bit for onboarding, we did a little bit for diversity and inclusion, and kind of those orange pieces, we did a little bit here and there, but it certainly wasn't what our main focus was. And so as I was mapping out kind of what the shop was doing, on your screen now is kind of the map I made of what it was that the learning and development team was offering here at Berkeley. And you can see we had quite a bit of open enrollment programming, but really, again, focused on the tuition assistance through UC Berkeley Extension, the compliance programming, that kind of thing. We did a little bit of custom programs for job-specific families simply because we had trainers on the team who came from those job families. So the subject matter experts were sitting here on the team, so they were creating training specifically for the job families that they used to be a part of. And a big operations team that was doing a lot of the analytics and dashboarding necessary as part of the compliance training. And so, our portfolio was really broken down into a very small kind of informal and social learning portfolio and a quite large formal learning portfolio. And so as I was thinking about that and thinking about this research project that I had done and thinking about the fact that instead of focusing just on us as L&D professionals, really focusing on the learner, I started to rethink what our organization could look like. And, there's a lot of groups that are kind of revisioning 70-20-10. On your screen right now is something from the 70-20-10 forum where they talk about how all of the formal learning and social learning and informal learning are kind of built upon each other, and they're all in this work-learn cycle, which I think is an interesting way to look at it. But there's also some other things I think that I'd like to put forward for you today that I've been kind of toying with that I'd be interested in kind of putting forward to you and seeing what you think. So instead of just thinking about revisioning this 70-20-10, what I'd like to propose is what I'm calling the you, me, we model of learning and development. And so in this model, we have the me. So the me represents the learner in the center. And that's really the self-directed learning piece of the learning model that we're trying to implement here at Berkeley. So focusing on the learner, empowering them to be self-directed about their learning and to go out and gather the information and the learning that they need to be successful. To the left of that is the you. So again, as the me, as the learner in the middle of this model, they look to you, or they look to us as learning and development professionals to be providing them with learning opportunities as well. So the you in this model is really learning that's coming from the organization. So learning that our learners are looking to us to provide to them. Then to the right of the learner in this model is what I'm calling the we. So that's, again, where the learner is looking out to their network, their social learning network, and building learning through others and thinking about how they can engage that network to help them learn more broadly. And so kind of keeping this in mind, thinking about how we wanted to restructure learning and development here at Berkeley, this is what our learning and development shop looks like today, so 13 months later. We've moved from a compliant shop to really being a proactive people partner for campus. You can see the way that I've structured this framework is with the darker red pieces being the learning and development component. So now those are all things that are handled within my shop, the learning and development shop. But also I've created partnerships, other Central Human Resource partners on the team here at Central Human Resources to kind of wrap our services with other experiences for people to help them in their learning and development. We've made relationships with operations, with our organization development team, and with recruiting to kind of wrap around the services that we were already offering within learning and development. So we were able to move to this by first outsourcing compliance training. So that first relationship that I talked to you about creating with our operations team, we literally outsourced our compliance training to our strategy and operations team. They were really excited to have it as part of their portfolio because it's something that they're measured on, something that the success of our compliance members actually impacts how they're viewed within the UC system. So they were excited to actually take that over from us and take it on with 2 full-time employees that kind of managed that compliance and dashboarding and all the data that went with that. With those 2 open positions, we hired an employee experience lead and an informal and social learning lead, whose jobs it were to really build out some of that additional programming in the employee experience arena. So the onboarding pieces, the engagement pieces, more in diversity and inclusion, those pieces became much more forefront for what we were doing because we had somebody who was focusing on those. And also bringing in an informal and social learning lead to really start thinking about learning technology and, how we can foster innovation and our human capital and all of those pieces around the social and informal learning space to make our program portfolio more robust. I talked to you a little bit about how we had 2 job family specific trainers. We actually replaced those folks. They ended up leaving the organization, and we brought in instructional designers. So instead of having subject matter experts for job family specific training here on our staff, we brought in 2 folks who are instructional design experts who can then partner with people on campus to build job family specific training that is co-owned. We wasn't budget neutral, so we needed a little bit of budget dollars. We had a career development lead, and she was a 60% employee. We moved her to 100% employee. So that required a little bit of business case making to our vice chancellor about why this person's time was needed and why we should increase the amount of money we're spending on salary in order to build this new proactive people culture here at UC Berkeley. We also started branding ourselves. So staff learning and development at Berkeley had just been kind of buried on a web page somewhere on Central HR's web page. We started really branding ourselves and started with the branding phrase, how do you want to grow today? So asking the people here on campus, what could we do to empower them to grow through their career, to grow their skills, to grow their engagement, to grow their community, where they wanted to grow and how we could partner with them to do that. So we went through a full branding exercise. We rebranded our website, rebranded all of our marketing materials, actually created a logo that we started putting on things. So we are talking to our campus clients about how we're here to help empower them to grow. And so with just some of those little changes that we made, this is now what the Berkeley Learning and Development Shop looks like 13 months later. You can see we still have a large open enrollment portfolio, but because we moved from having subject matter experts on our staff to instructional designers, we were able to really increase our custom program portfolio as well, and our ability to create programs that went out to our partners on campus and engaged with them. As I mentioned, we hired a new employee experience lead, so that person was able to kind of beef up our employee engagement portfolio. We hired an informal and social learning lead, so that person was able to really increase and make stronger our informal and social learning portfolio. And then our operations team was shrunk a little bit, but because we partnered with our strategy and operations group here in Central HR, we haven't felt any impact from that. We were still able to be really, really successful just in a partnership kind of outsourced way instead of owning that talent within the L&D shop. And so by thinking about learning and development in a little bit of a different way, thinking about it in this you, me, we model, we were able to really rethink how we structured, how we brought people together, how we created learning experiences for people on campus to hopefully make them more successful. And I know a lot of people are purists and want to think about how this maps to 70-20-10. And the really good news is it maps absolutely perfectly to 70-20-10. So if you think about the me, the self-directed learning, as the informal learning, so the 70 and the 70-20-10. You think about the we as the social learning, or the 20 in the 70-20-10. And you can think about the formal learning, the you and the formal learning is the same thing, or the 10. But by thinking about it in this way, I'm putting forward that it kind of takes us from looking at this learning that we're developing for our clients from a learning and development lens, and really puts the focus on them and what they need and how we can help them to be successful. So a couple of things that we learned as we were thinking about this as we're creating the U piece. So that's the formal piece, the piece that is developed by the organization and kind of pushed towards the learner. Be sure to be thinking about your learners as clients. And as I mentioned, brand yourself. Start talking about how you're there to help them be successful. Create learning journeys for employees that they know are valuable and impactful. And think about ways you can complement your formal programming with menus of other opportunities that people can get to just in time. So think about, if you have a formal program around coaching, are there some videos or some other things that you can build around that so people know that they can go to the formal face-to-face instructor-led training, but if they need information right away, there's some resources for them. Prepare and leverage technology in order to do that. And then, as everything in the business world, if you measure and you reward success, people will continue to do it. So there's an old saying that says, what gets measured is what gets done, and what gets rewarded is what gets repeated. That is proven true over and over again. So if you can do badges or do certificates or do things to measure people's success in completing the learning that you're pushing out to them and rewarding them for that time and the effort and the increased skill and the increased aptitude they have at their job, the more successful you'll be. As you're thinking about creating the me piece of your you, me, we model, think about how you can empower your learners to be self-discovery learners. So how you can empower them to go out and find learning that they need in the moment to be successful. We did a lot of work around building understanding and building out value propositions for informal learning. Here on campus, we had to look at our learner savviness and figure out how we could meet them where they were. So Berkeley is located very close to the Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley has some of the smartest, most savvy online learning, technological learning experts in the world. And Berkeley isn't far behind. We have some of the smartest staff and faculty in the world here. What we did learn was, though, that we still needed to do a little bit of curation and curating of learning pathways to show people, what they could use and what they could find to be successful. I liken this to if you've ever gone into a library and tried to find a book without using a card catalog, or if you've ever gone on to, say, Netflix and tried to find a movie with absolutely no navigation. It's just really tough. So thinking about how you're going to curate learning pathways so that even the informal piece of your learning strategy is something that's easy to navigate and helps people to be successful. That's also what we talked about in the push versus pull resources, making sure you're modeling the behavior you want to see. We have a lot of communications that come out. We have the chancellor talking about how it's important to be informal learners, to have a culture of lifelong learning. And again, acknowledging and rewarding when people are being successful in this space, we found to be very important. And then for the creating of the we piece of the you, me, we model, we really had to do some education on what and how social learning worked and how it was important. As we talk to our learners here on campus, just like as we talk to the learners out in the world when we were doing our survey, there was a lot of misunderstanding between the difference between social learning and social media. And so we had to talk about what those differences were. And we had to, build widespread safe spaces and supportive communities and make sure people knew that they were able to go to these safe spaces and to learn from each other without worrying about consequences. So without us being too big brother, as they say, about seeing who doesn't know what and punishing them for things that they don't know that they're going to their social network to help learn. We had a lot of communities of practice here on campus that were already working. So we took advantage of that and we thought about how can we scale those. and how can we make them more sustainable, and how can we help them to be our ambassadors for social learning on campus. Again, acknowledging and rewarding successes and creating and curating toolkits for people to help them build communities became very, very important for us as well. And so just for the last few minutes, I'll share with you kind of, that was what we did here at Berkeley. I want to share with you a little bit of what others around the globe, what I've learned talking to others around the globe about how they've been measuring their learning success. And it probably not a surprise to any of you as you think about measuring learning success. It's challenging because it's hard to measure skill acquisition, and it's hard to measure literal talent development, and it's hard to define informal and social learning, as we showed very early in this presentation. And it's hard to measure informal learning because it's learning that happens every day, and it's hard to measure human social behavior. Humans are by nature social beings, and so it's hard to kind of quantify and measure these things, which makes it hard for learning and development sometimes to measure our success if we're not simply looking at formal learning programs where we can do testing or do smile sheets asking people how they felt about the learning after they leave. But so I just want to give you just a couple of learning success. So kind of measuring through behaviors, measuring through the business, and measuring through your employees. And so what I often say is if you're creating programming, but you don't know what behavior change you're looking for from people after they take the program, you probably shouldn't be running the program. So think about, as you're building programs, what changes you want to see in behaviors and in job performance from folks. Think about, what kind of post-program assessments you can use with coaches or with managers to actually figure out if that behavior change happened. Gain insights directly from the people that are watching the participants that have gone through your programs, then returning to the job, and start gathering those behavior indicators for success, and you can start building the case for measuring kind of your success in your programs. I said the second piece that we often look for is measuring learning through business. So if your programs aren't being developed to address a challenge that you're seeing within your organization, it's probably time to reassess your program portfolio. This talks a lot about that notion of chief learning officers and learning and development professionals being able to have a seat at the table, as they say, as senior leaders in the organization are thinking about where they want their organization to go and building the strategic plan and building out strategic outcomes for where they want the business to be able to go, making sure that you as a learning and development professional have a seat at that table and are able to think through strategically with your senior leaders about where you are now, where they want to go, what the talent gaps are, and how you can fill those gaps to give you the talent that you need within your organization to get where you want to go. Becomes very, very important. Lastly, in thinking about your employees, we often say if employees aren't in your programming and they're not on board with what you're doing, it's time to find out why. So if we move from this learning and development inward focus of what we're pushing out to our clients to really thinking about them and what they need, it's a natural step to ask them, what is it that you need? What would help you be more successful? What would bring you to our programs? And you can start measuring participation and engagement and looking at your succession pipeline, looking to make sure that you have people in the pipeline that are ready to go into positions that you'll need to be successful in the future, measuring retention, measuring promotion rates. All those kind of things will help you start showing the value of your learning and development portfolio. And so just for the last kind of final slides here, I just wanted to share with you some of the key findings we found in the you, me, and we space. As you're thinking about creating the you, or the formal learning space, as we said, create learning journeys for employees, not one and done programs. And make sure you're thinking ahead of time about what you want to change and how you're going to be able to see its demonstratable impact, and engage with top leaders and have those discussions, and really be strategic and thoughtful about what you're doing and what you're creating, and don't just wing it, becomes very, very important. As you're creating the me learning, as you're creating that informal learning, what I've found is that informal learning often needs to be curated to be effective. I've talked to you a little bit about why that is. You know, giving people a little bit of a roadmap to help them find out where they are and where they need to go can be really powerful, as opposed to just opening them up to all of the learning resources that are available today. Think about how you can encourage and facilitate informal learning. Even though it's informal, doesn't mean that you can just, let it be and hope that it comes about all by itself. Also, you need to keep in mind that informal learning can be really hard to keep going. As you're putting informal learning opportunities out there for folks, some things will fail, but you need to trust that what sticks is what's needed, and, kind of revisit some of those things maybe that have failed in the past, or that you haven't quite got the right message around, and continue to put things out there and see what people are consuming and see what's making people excited and more successful, and kind of build your strategy in a little bit of that continually evolving way. And so lastly, as we're thinking about creating the we and creating the social learning, just a couple of things to keep in mind. Using social learning as part of onboarding programs or ways to deepen your communication strategy and engage and retain employees can be really powerful. I mentioned that we humans tend to be social beings, so creating that kind of social networking for folks within your organization to help them learn and help them be successful can be really, really powerful. Make sure to ask for feedback, ask folks what they want, ask what kind of tools they're using. Don't be afraid of social learning. I think there's a lot of groups that think, social learning is simply social media and it's something that should be separate from the workplace. If you define your program well and avoid kind of being big brother about it, but really build a program that people are excited to use and that helps them come together and learn in this social kind of larger than one space, I think it can be really, really powerful and successful. So in thinking about that, this is, again, the you, me, we model that I'm putting forward for you all to consider as you're thinking about redesigning possibly, or revisioning, or even just tweaking your learning and development portfolios yourself. And kind of to that end, I want to make sure we keep the conversation going. So, I hope that you'll think about adding me and folks on my team here to your social learning network. You can always email me, of course, or better yet, find me on LinkedIn, one of the great social media tools, but can be certainly used to broaden your social network and help to, gain more knowledge and help you to be successful as a social learner. So with that, Wes, that kind of brings me to the end of my formal remarks. I'd love to take any questions or make any additional comments if there's anything else that has come up as we've been chatting.
Great, thank you for that. So yeah, I'm just keeping the chat open and the Q&A open. If anybody has any questions, this is a great time to post those up. We'll have a few minutes here, and then again, definitely you can email Angela or find her on LinkedIn. Also, if you are looking for more information that's tied a little bit more to like Totara products, like how Totara Learn or Social can support the things that Angela's talked about today, you can come talk to me about that. And I'm happy to share, since that's the sort of stuff that we've been doing internally as well. But I'll just leave the floor open for questions if anybody has anything that's popped up for them. Oh, so Melanie asks a question. Can we get a copy of the slides? Which is always helpful.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wesley, if you don't have them, I can send them off to you, and please feel free to share them. I know you'll also be posting this presentation on YouTube, so having the slides and then also having the video hopefully will be helpful in sharing that out to your audience. So I'm happy to get that to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. And folks, what we'll do is we'll follow up like we do with our other webinars. We'll follow up with an email that has a link to the video on YouTube as well as a link to the slides. Another question that's popped up: how do you measure and report on success in social learning?
So for our social learning, what we've really been focusing on over the last 6 or so months here is our communities of practice. So kind of taking these groups that have organically kind of formed, grassroots groups that have formed around folks interested in learning about a certain topic or about a certain area of work. And before, we had really just kind of let them out in the world to do with what they will. And what we did here was we started engaging with them and talking to them and asking them about their membership and about the events that they were doing and helping them to kind of curate those events so that it wasn't one group doing one thing and one group doing another thing, helping them to build kind of a calendar of events. We gave them a little bit of money, so we funded them just a little bit. We gave each of our communities of practice just about $1,000 to help them have even more events, with the goal of increasing their participation, so increasing their numbers. And also, what our second goal was, having an impact on the community. So we were able to measure their success by seeing how many more people actually participated within the communities of practice themselves, how many more people participated within the events that they were holding. And so that was one way that we were measuring our social learning impact, was kind of just through participation. We also have a contract here with lynda.com, which has been purchased by LinkedIn and is being transitioned to LinkedIn Learning. We're using that as one of the vehicles that we're pushing out learning kind of in a network-based way. So we're able to very easily kind of measure the participation, measure how long people are interacting with videos, and kind of measure our success in that way as well. Let me think if there's others. You know, we send out surveys after our formal learning programs, asking managers what kind of behavior change they've seen within their employees over the last 6 months or 12 months after a program. We've thought about potentially doing that with some of our kind of higher level informal and social learning folks. We haven't quite got there yet, but we're considering kind of collecting those stories about success, to start showing how it's not just the formal classroom, but it's also the network-based learning and kind of those informal things that are also impacting. So those are some of the things that we've been trying to do. Mostly for, I think, social learning, it's really about engagement and collecting stories, asking people how they were able to take what they learned to be better and more successful within their jobs.
Thank you for that. So we have another question from Sam. How have you been encouraging learners to record their learning and reflecting on their development in a journal / blog or portfolio? If so, who have they shared it with?
So we've thought about that. I think that's a really great idea. And depending on the level of trust that you have within your organization, I think it can be really powerful. What we've started to do here is, instead of doing a yearly performance review, we're moving to what we call a continuous conversation, which is, we're using a tool through SumTotal, which is our learning management system, where employees and their managers can record a conversation around some goals and their activity towards those goals, and kind of have a back and forth that we're requiring them to record 4 times a year or 3 times a year, I think, instead of just the kind of annual performance evaluation. So we are recording kind of a little bit of that internal dialogue and then the manager response to that within that one tool. We've also really tried to create some discussion boards. We have a tool here that we're using to build our communities. So that safe learning space community that I talked about, that we call our Wisdom Cafe at UC Berkeley. And we tried, when we first launched Wisdom Cafe, to have kind of manager discussion boards and manager musings and blogs and things that we could get people to use to build that social learning muscle throughout campus. What we found right now is we have a little bit of a trust problem that we're trying to work through. And we found that there's a bit of fear about folks being vulnerable and sharing things that where it shows that they maybe don't know the answer, or where they're not the expert. And so we haven't had as much pickup on some of those more public blogging and journaling spaces yet. The hope is that as we're getting people to kind of go through programming and to build that reflective muscle internally, that we will get to a place where we can start in very safe spaces, start sharing those out, and then maybe broadly build that trust muscle to be more openly available to the broader campus. But right now, we're still kind of taking the baby steps early in the beginning to get people comfortable with being vulnerable in that kind of public way.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I'm not seeing any more questions coming in, but folks, we definitely have ways for you to get a hold of Angela if you do have additional questions or things that come up. Angela, are there any other thoughts or things you want to share with us before we end the session for today?
No, Wesley, I'd just like to say thank you for spending the past 45 minutes with me. I really enjoyed kind of sharing this maybe new way of thinking and new way of structuring learning and development. I hope that you got a couple pieces or some nuggets of information that you find helpful and that you can take back to your organizations. And as Wesley said, please reach out to me, reach out to him to find out all the kind of connecting opportunities that we can help you with on our end. So thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll be following up with a link to the YouTube presentation as well as the PowerPoint.